You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is August 21st, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us. We're going to be talking with Jay Beeber, who is the executive director of the policy, for the National Motorists Association. So we're going to be talking about lots of things in motion that affect everyone. So, but before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our guest, Jay Beeber, and my name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. Wanted to make a few announcements before we get into the show. I just wanted to remind everybody, James, maybe you could bring it up, but Constitution Day in Folsom is going to be September 15th. So definitely wanted to remind people to put that on their calendars. And we'll also have a guest coming in to talk about that on September 4th. So definitely check that out as well. And some of the other topics we're going to be getting into as well. We're going to be talking about things regarding, privacy on the road, issues with congestion pricing and all kinds of other stuff that are interesting things that are happening out there. But before we get into that, we always have a quote of the day, a Liberty quote of the day. And this time I picked one that's sort of, I think is kind of relevant, and it's definitely somebody who warrants mention for libertarians. And that is George Carlin, comedian George Carlin. And he said, have you ever noticed that anybody driving slower than you is an idiot and anyone going faster than you is a maniac? That kind of says it all about trying to regulate speeds, maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, well, you know what? That's really funny that you picked that. I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I was aware of that quote, but I talk about this exact thing all the time, which is that everybody thinks that they're bad drivers, like everybody else is a bad driver. And what I try to explain to people is that you're just remembering the bad ones. Like the vast majority, like when you're driving, drive on the highway sometime and just marvel at the fact that all these people are in these machines that are going, 65, 70, 75 miles an hour. And nobody's crashing into each other. Everybody's pretty much staying in their lane. There's one person that's doing something wrong, and all of a sudden, like, we have maniacs on the road. It's one of these things that our brains does that, that's interesting and kind of fools us all the time. Because, like I said, we remember the hits and we forget all the misses that we just don't recognize all day long. So, and this is why people think traffic is a problem, traffic violations are a problem, and that there's a lot of bad drivers out there. They really aren't, and that's really an interesting thing. So it's a perfect quote for today.
I just wanted to say something regarding what you said about remembering the hits and forgetting the misses. That also sounds like politicians as well, with all the legislation. They only remember the few times they hit, and even when they don't hit, they lie about it sometimes. So
no, Jason, they always hit. You hear? They always hit. Right? Always. Without fail.
This is what I say about government policy. If it's not working at all, we're not doing it. We're not doing enough of it. And if it's working a little bit, we're not doing enough of it. It's always, we're not doing enough of it. We need to do more. We need to have more government control. That's always the answer, no matter what the outcome is. It's always, we're just not doing enough.
Yeah.
Well, that's
because
to
slow the traffic.
Yeah, that's because they always have 100% batting average. You see, is the rest of all too dumb to realize it?
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Leon, did you have any other comments before we jump into talking about the National Motorists Association?
No, I think Jay got it. I agree with him. He got it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to bring up then the page for Jay's organization here, and maybe we could show that, James, our invisible hand there. So here we go. So this is the National Motorists Association. And so, Jay, do you want to tell us a little bit about what your organization does for all of us out there who are drivers?
Yeah, well, the National Motorists Association is the only national organization that is fighting for your rights and freedom on the road, to use your personal automobile, to go where you want, when you want, how you want, free from government, unreasonable government intrusion and penalties and fines and restrictions. So we're the only national organization that's doing this. There are other ones that sound like they're doing that. We won't mention the three letters, but there's other groups out there sound like they're fighting for drivers. They're not. We're the only organization that's doing that. We're the organization that got rid of the 55 mile an hour speed limit, national speed limit, in the 90s. It started out in the 70s, and we were formed in the 80s, long before I was involved. And then in the 90s, we got rid of the 55 mile an hour national speed limit. So if you like the fact that you can legally go faster than 55 miles an hour on a highway in most places, you can thank the National Motorists Association.
I love that every time I'm driving to Vegas.
Yes.
I would hate driving at 55 through the desert.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a famous song about that too. So.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you. So, how exactly did your organization get started? How did you guys get involved with doing this kind of thing?
Well, it was really just to fight the 55 mile an hour national speed limit. It started out, and I'm going to probably mangle the name because I wasn't around then, but it was the something for rational drivers. I should know this. I'm the executive director for policy. I should know what it was called, but now I feel like an idiot. But anyway, we had another name previously, and then it morphed into the National Motorists Association, and I think the National Motorists Association is a good name because it basically kind of describes what we do. And what we do is, we make sure the traffic laws and policies are fair and just and don't overly penalize people. We are in favor of safe driving. We're in favor of courteous driving. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now on the roadway and has been happening for the last number of decades to try to force you out of your car and to make driving as difficult and as miserable and as expensive as possible. And we're here to try to prevent some of that from happening.
Are you guys active in all 50 states?
Yes, we are, and in Canada as well. So even though it's a national, it's the other national too.
Oh, okay.
Maybe now would be a good time for our invisible hand to bring back the visual again, because they actually do have pages so that people can check out what you guys are doing in their states. And so here you can go to the states tab and you can check these out. And we've actually pulled up the one for California already here. So we have that, and you can see these articles that are related. And I guess, what's going on, Jay, right now in California with you guys? It looks like you guys have an action page here for California.
Yeah, well, as many people who are watching this probably know, there's a legislative season in California. It's just ending now. Bills are just finalizing and going to the governor. But throughout the legislative season that starts in January or, February, March is when it really gets hot and heavy. We track the bills, we see what's going on, and we try to affect change and make sure that the bills are reasonable. Most of the time they're not. So it's most of the time it's us fighting against legislation. And you can see if you look at what's on here, there's a couple of bills that we were fighting this year. Some we were successful in getting rid of, some we weren't. Some having to do. There's one having to do with school zones, and that was a really boneheaded idea. That one just got stopped in the Appropriations Committee. Thankfully, there was another bill. Actually, we took down some of them because they've died previously. But there was one that was going to stop all right turns, which is insane. There was all sorts of crazy ideas this year. But in California, for some reason, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier every year. So, and then there was another bill here that's expanding the pilot program for automated speed enforcement. Many people don't know. Last year, the legislature passed a bill to allow 6 cities to do what they're calling a pilot program for speed enforcement. We can get into why that is a problem, but this year, of course, they decided, 6 cities is not enough. We need another city because another city wants this. And unfortunately, there was a tragedy on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. There was somebody driving at 100 miles an hour, something a camera would never stop, and everybody admits a camera would not have stopped this. But it was. Person claimed they were in a road rage situation. Somebody was chasing them, unfortunately, and ended up in a crash. And 4 Pepperdine college students were killed. Very tragic. But that was being used as an excuse to get speed cameras on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. So that's what happened there. And of course, every legislator falling all over themselves to try to say, oh, we have to save these lives, we have to save these lives. Yet everybody admits the cameras would have made no difference if they were present. But that's how government works.
So Jay, you just talk about fighting the bills. You spend a lot of your time, I guess, fighting some sort of legislation. Some of the craziness, especially that's going on in California, I'm sure is also true in other states. Do you guys usually run up against environmental regulations and environmental mandates? Are you guys running up against that quite a lot?
We run up against that more at the national level. Obviously, California is on steroids for some of this stuff, but we are, we tend to deal with that at the federal level because, here's the thing: we don't get into oftentimes a specific environmental law unless it has to do with directly having to do with, let's say, an EPA emission standard or something like that. But a lot of what's happening with the war on cars, the push to get you out of your car, is grounded in this concern about the environment. So obviously the environmental concerns obviously touch on all of these things because unfortunately those concerns are being used as an excuse to curtail people's driving. And obviously that's a point where we get involved.
I see. Yes.
There was a related article I was thinking about bringing up later in the show, but maybe now might be a good time to bring it up since you were talking about it. But apparently there were 26 state attorney generals that were suing NHTSA, that's the National Highway Traffic and Safety, what agency I guess is, administration rather, and and that's over the fuel economy standards, or what a lot of people here I guess is CAFE standards often. And one of the I guess things to come out of this, I thought it was kind of weird, is that why is it that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Agency is dealing with corporate average fuel economy? Because if you look at their mission, it says our mission is to save lives, prevent injuries, reduce economic costs due to road crashes through education, research, safety standards, and enforcement. I don't see anything there that relates to fuel economy.
So
I don't know.
Are you suggesting, Jason, that there is mission creep with the government? Are you suggesting that that's what's happening there? Because I'm shocked. I'm shocked at the gambling going on in the back.
We are knuckleheads. We are knuckleheads. We'll never suggest a thing like that.
Well, the only connection I can think of is like when you go to the pump and you see those high sticker prices in California, that maybe by lowering the CAFE standards, you're hoping you'll give less people heart attacks at the pump. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're talking about an agency that really should be doing this, it should be the EPA, I would imagine. That would make the most sense. But nothing in government makes any sense, right? So
Right.
So obviously that's a problem. But it's interesting because I haven't really had a chance to talk about this lawsuit recently. But there's actually a really good argument in terms of this lawsuit as to the fact that whatever the mandate is, and however the Congress parsed this out to the different agencies to make some of these rules, that those rules were supposed to be grounded in certain standards that are achievable. And unfortunately, what they're doing in the quest to eliminate internal combustion engine vehicles, they're making standards that are not achievable. And then what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, we'll just count electric vehicles as having this imaginary fuel economy standard, which of course there's no fuel involved. So it's just this imaginary thing, which is to encourage the automakers to have a larger part of their fleet to be electric, because then there's no emissions theoretically. Of course, there are on the front end, not on the back end. But it's a way of pushing electric vehicle mandates without actually having an electric vehicle mandate. I don't know if I explained that well, but that's
No. I get that.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
They're trying to eliminate gas fuel cars, and they're doing it by raising the CAFE standards so that only electric vehicles will qualify. I mean, that's quite clear from your statement. But the point is, though, I mean, Jason raised the issue about whether this is within the mandates of some of these government agencies. I think the Supreme Court just gave a ruling that will probably speak to this particular issue, even though they didn't deal with this cafe standard issue. Right. Is that some of these government agencies are always creeping beyond their mandates because Congress have to give the authority to them in order to do something, but some of them are gone way beyond the authority given to them by Congress. So these are the kind of things I hope that will get resolved over the next few years as this new Supreme Court ruling is implemented. And one of the things that may fall under this ruling will be this cafe standard issue, because that agency, NIPSA, or whatever you call it, have gone way beyond their mandates. There's nothing in their mandate given to them by Congress that suggests that they should be doing this. So,
right, exactly, and I think you're talking about the rollback of the Chevron decision. So,
yes.
Which we were all very happy to see, because what that decision, which had been made many years ago, did was it basically said that the agency that's promulgating rules gets to decide what Congress meant, right? So instead of doing actual law and following the normal standards that you would when you're having a question of law and what was meant by a certain law, the Supreme Court a number of years ago said, well, we're just going to defer to the agencies. And if the agency says this is the way it should be interpreted, then it should be. A lot of people had a problem with this, what they call the Chevron doctrine. And I'm really glad to see that thrown out, because now they're actually going to go back and look and see, what did the law say? How do we interpret that properly? And that's the way we should be interpreting our laws. That's the way we should be making our laws. And it's actually better for everybody. I know it's always characterized as this right-left thing, but it's actually good for everybody that the law be followed the way the law was implemented. And if there's a question of interpretation, go back to the original law and interpret it that way. That's the way it should be done.
Indeed. Indeed, yes.
Maybe put the onus on lawmakers just a little bit more to try and be a little more clear what they are putting forward.
But this is a real big problem you're raising, though, Jason. This is a really big problem. They use words like reasonable. They use words like reasonable accommodations and all these sort of things. That these vague terms that could be interpreted a million different ways. And before you know, we have a bunch of regulations that means nothing, and everybody have to follow them.
Yeah, they're very reasonably unreasonable.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that we do when we're looking at these laws, especially in California, is I'm constantly going to the lawmakers who are writing these laws and the people that are promulgating this, and I'm like, okay, do you understand how this could possibly be interpreted or misinterpreted, and this is how it should be fixed? If you like, and they're like, well, no, it seems good enough. I mean, it's just like they won't listen. And then what happens is this actually happened with a law that was passed a couple of years ago, where I came out and I said, the way that you wrote this, this is going to be misinterpreted. And so the next year they had to come back and fix it. And of course they fixed it more in the way they wanted it fixed than what they had said originally, than what they intended. But of course, but I said that this was going to be misinterpreted, and then the state agency that had to implement this particular rule had to do with speed limits, and they said, this is unclear. We don't know what you mean. We don't know what we're supposed to do here. And so the next year they had to come back and pass another law to fix the first law, which I warned them was not clear. But who am I? So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I know this is getting just a little off topic, but Gorsuch recently came out with that book Overruled, and he talks about how we have no idea. We can't count the number of laws that are out there, criminal laws, in fact. And I just think it's kind of telling too. I mean, a lot of these legislators, they put these little ships out, I guess, like a little legislative message in a bottle that they send to the executive agencies, and then who knows what they'll turn into when they get out there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Congress is supposed to make laws, and unfortunately they defer to the agencies, and then the agencies make rules and regulations which basically are enforced as laws, and this is where we get into a lot of problems. And Neil Gorsuch, by the way, is my absolute favorite Supreme Court justice, maybe of all time. So he's just awesome in the way that he interprets the law and the way he looks at the Constitution. And I haven't agreed with every single decision that he's either voted on or written, but overall, he's the best Supreme Court justice that we've had in a very, very long time. And one of the ways you know this, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, is that he often sides, like on these cases, you never know which side he's going to be on, because he looks at the law, and sometimes things come out not the way he personally may want them to be, but in a way in which he believes is the way the law should be properly interpreted. So regardless of the outcome, and I don't think you can say that about maybe some more of the liberal justices and even some of the more conservative justices as well. So he's a great justice. And getting back to how many laws there are out there, we probably will talk about maybe automated enforcement at some point. And one of the cases that I like to make is that if you take a camera and you follow somebody around all day long, you will catch them breaking the law. You will basically, could be a federal law, could be a local law. There's so many laws out there that people break all day long. And if we were surveilled all day long, it would be a horrible society, because you're constantly be catching people doing stuff wrong and penalizing them for really minor indiscretions. And I'm really glad that he wrote this book. It's an important book, and I hope everybody reads it. I'll see there. I'll hold up the book. Oh, I don't have it. So
I think it's called "Overruled the Human Cost of Too Much Law" or something
Laws,
like that.
yes, something like that, yes.
Yeah.
But just to further the point here, I think somebody wrote a book not too long ago speaking about the fact that the average American commits about 3 felonies a day or some kind of stuff like that, without even and most of the time not even aware of it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, because there's all these regulations, there's all these rules. There's no way you could possibly follow them, and that's true when it comes to traffic rules and laws. And I'm dealing with in Ohio right now this question of should they put school bus cameras, cameras on school buses to ticket people for passing a school bus when the lights are flashing. And you would think that would be a very simple question, but there's so many different rules in different states about whether you have to stop and under conditions, and you can't expect people to do this right all the time, because it's terribly confusing. And they've tried to pass this law in California a number of times. I'm sure they'll be back next year trying it again, but we've successfully fought it, because all it does is just churn tickets all day long. It doesn't actually make anybody safer.
One thing I do hear kind of in your comments, though, is I guess you think there's definitely a role for government in transportation. It's just that we've kind of gone way overboard. Is that sort of and so you guys are trying to just rein it into something manageable? Is that kind of sort of where you guys are at, or?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not anarchists. I mean, here's the thing.
Some in the libertarian movement are.
I know. This is where our company was so fucking in the libertarian movement. But look, there's painted lines on the roadway. You should stay on your side of the road. I mean, there's basic rules to follow. If you're on a neighborhood street, don't be driving 100 miles an hour. There's basic rules. And what we should be doing is we should be going after the outliers, the people that are really way far above and outside of what reasonable behavior is. But that's not what happens. They go after the low-hanging fruit. So you get a police officer that's posted as a stop sign, and instead of going after the very rare instance where somebody might completely blow through a stop sign, and that's only because they're not paying attention, by the way, not because they're saying, hey, there's a stop sign, I'm just not going to stop. But the people that are getting tickets are the people that are slowly, just slowly rolling up to the stop sign. They're clear in all directions. They can clearly see there's nothing in their way. So they just keep going. They don't kind of come to that stop and just sit there and wait and then keep going. Most people just, are on their way. They're not putting anybody in danger. But those are the people that get caught up in these laws, even though they're really intended for the people who are the real dangerous folks out there. But that's not who's getting the ticket. Every once in a while, you catch a really bad driver. But for the most part, it's the average person that rarely does anything wrong and just kind of got caught up that day. So,
of course.
Well, what do you think the biggest challenges to our liberty are that are coming at us in the form of transportation through legislators? I mean, where are they really hitting us hardest on our liberties?
I think automated enforcement is getting way out of hand. And we think it's always been a problem, but now, I can run through the litany of automated enforcement things that they want to foist upon us, and how it would even be worse in the future. So most people are familiar with speed cameras or red light cameras, right? And there are problems with those things. It's a really wonky conversation about exactly why these are problematic. But But that's what most people are familiar with. So now they have stop sign cameras to do exactly what I just described, which is to ticket somebody for just slowly rolling past the stop sign. Excuse me, just slowly rolling past the stop sign and not coming to a complete stop. A technical violation. They have. I talked about school bus cameras. They have noise cameras to ticket people whose cars are too loud or if they're playing their music too loud. There's just a whole host of automated ticketing that they want to foist upon us. And coming down the road are AI-powered cameras in which the camera will be able to kind of peer inside your car and kind of determines with some algorithm, I'm not sure how it works, but there's an algorithm where it can determine like what you're doing in the car. So if you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, like drinking or smoking a cigarette or whatever, so your hands aren't completely on the wheel, like they can give you a ticket for this kind of stuff. And this is what I say, which is that if you're in favor of this kind of stuff, you have to really think about what kind of society we want to live in. Do we want to live in a society in which we're surveilled all day long, just waiting for us to make some kind of mistake, to step out of line, to slam the hammer down on us? And if that's what you are in favor of, I think you should go live in North Korea or China, because you would love those societies.
Yes, in true. So Jay, am I mistaken? I thought there was a constitutional challenge to using cameras at intersections because there was not a actual human being observing the violation or the alleged violation. I thought there was some constitutional violation here in California, constitutional challenge, I should say, against those cameras.
I'm sure there were challenges. None of them have really been successful. There's been successful challenges with regards to how the laws are written and whether or not the system actually follows that law and whatnot. But what the legislature did a couple of years ago is that there were some challenges saying, the photograph is it shouldn't be used, or the video shouldn't be used as evidence unless there's this chain of custody and all of the sort of these legal things. And the legislature basically just decided, we're just going to pass a law that says none of that is necessary. So that's what they did. But I would say that we've been very successful in California pushing back against especially red light cameras. And one of the reasons is because I'm primarily responsible for this. I'll toot my own horn for a second, which is I got rid of the red light cameras in Los Angeles and many, many other cities in California. And I got the state to change the protocols for how long the yellow light needs to be. And once that was
just a second, let me throw out my own yellow light here. If you're watching on public access, you're going to have to catch the rest of the show online. We got a lot of great things to talk about. But back to the show.
Yes,
go ahead with those yellow light times.
Now we're really going to tell all the inside stuff. So we got the state to change the protocols for how long the yellow light time needs to be to make them more reasonable and to build in what we call tolerance in engineering in engineering wording. So we are for straight through violations, red light cameras cannot be as profitable as they used to be. And so a lot of cities and a lot of jurisdictions have eliminated their programs. They all said, oh, you know what, this is just for safety. It's not for revenue. And we would hope we never have to give out any tickets. Of course, once we forced them to issue less tickets because the yellow light time was longer, they all got rid of the programs because they were losing money. So this is how we know they're absolute liars. I have no compunction about saying that. They are liars if they tell you that this program or these automated enforcement programs are about safety and they're not about revenue. They're lying. And the way that we know this is because in every single case, save one that I can talk about, is as soon as they start losing money, they end the program. So we know that it's about money.
How shocking it is to find out that our government actually lies to us. My God.
Yes,
Jay,
I know, it's shocking.
One of the questions I always like to ask people who come on the show too is, what was it that got you into this line of work? Sort of questioning all these laws and working for this, this organization to defend people's rights. What was it that sort of rang your Liberty bell on this?
Okay, so this is really interesting. So I can give a really short answer and then I'll give a little longer answer, which is I don't like bullies. Okay, I don't like bullies. And the government, especially with regards to red light cameras and a lot of the automated enforcement stuff, the government's a big bully. And they're taking people's money for no reason, not improving safety. And I was like, we got to do something about this. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that I was working in the entertainment industry, and we had some downtime. There was a writer's strike around 2010. And I saw a news report on Channel 2 in LA, and it was about how the red light cameras were causing more accidents, not less accidents. And I have a science background, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. Let me look into that. And it turns out, long story, a little shorter, is that I found out that this whole thing was a giant scam, and that if you increase the yellow light time and you do the engineering properly, you don't need red light cameras. And it was just a moneymaker for the city. The city, eventually we found out that the city was losing $1 million a year on the program. Imagine that. The program was so bad in LA that a money-making program, they found out a way to lose $1 million a year on it. And so that's how I kind of got into it. I started contacting, I knew nothing about government and how it worked in LA, and I didn't know any of the players, didn't know anything. I just started making phone calls and contacting people. And after a couple of months of that and letting council members and their staff know what was going on, the city controller came out with a report basically backing up everything that I had been telling people for the last few months. And so that became a big thing. And then a whole bunch of other things happened, and the police commission, through my urging, decided not to renew the program and take away their support of it. And then they ended the program, and that's kind of how I got involved in this whole crazy thing. And I was not working with the National Motorists Association at that time. It was just some knucklehead who was sitting in LA and just was like, hey, these people are missing something. They don't understand what they're talking about. I'm just going to go tell them. So, it was interesting. I will tell you a funny story though. The staff members that I was contacting, I kind of became friendly with some of them, and one of them told me at the end of this whole process, after they had ended the red light camera program, I saw him and we were talking. He goes, when you used to call the office, they used to say, "Hey, Justin Bieber's on the phone for you." So that's how I got into it, and and the rest, I guess, is history. I was doing a thing, and I still am to some extent, called Safer Streets LA. I created this organization to fight all these crazy laws, and then I hooked up with the National Motors Association, and now I'm the executive director for policy.
So when I mean, I don't know if you're a libertarian or you just call yourself liberty minded. When did you take on that persona? When did that become part of your being?
Again, that's a really interesting question. I think throughout my whole life, I've always been like, don't tell me what to do. Like, don't tell me what time to go to bed, right? Like all of that kind of stuff. As when we're kids, I never really grew out of it. But when I was younger, I was probably, would consider me like a Democrat, right? But I had some friends in college who were libertarians, and I was like, that's weird. What's that, right? And then once I started thinking about it more deeply and thinking about what they were talking about and reading some things like there's a book called Libertarianism, a Primer, which is a really good book. And I think there's another one, and I'm forgetting what the other one is. But I read a couple of books about it. I'm like, this makes sense. This is actually what I really believe in. And I think that most people, if you talk to them, are actually libertarian-ish, right? Like the vast majority of the public just wants to live their life and have the government not impose on them, set up a couple of reasonable rules, make sure nobody's cheating, and just don't tell me what to do with my life. And that's, I think, where most people are. They want people to be, socially accepting and sort of fiscally conservative. If you're the government, don't waste my money. That's kind of describes libertarianism. Again, I'm a libertarian with a small L, and I think that's where most people are. If you take the world's smallest political quiz, or whatever that thing is called, you'll find out that most people sort of fall somewhere in the libertarian sphere.
I guess, but I tell you, when we were testing people at the state fair, an awful lot of people fell on the progressive side of things here in California. I don't know if they're just trying to virtue signal. Or
right. That. But unfortunately, people are very beholden to their tribe. So
yes.
People tend to vote based on a letter next to somebody's name and not based on what somebody's policies are. I always wonder, before I left California, I kept saying, it's going to get so bad, people are going to vote differently. It's going to get so bad, people are going to vote differently. And then they did, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, at some point, people have to, and I'm still waiting. I feel like 3 or 4 years ago, I moved out, and I'm still waiting for people to realize how bad it is. So
well, I think eventually, eventually, the pendulum. I mean, if you go back in U.S. history, you'll see the pendulum swings one way and then it swings the other way. And I think eventually, I mean, things are bad right now. I would agree. I think the pendulum has gone too far to the left, quite frankly. That's my belief. And I think eventually it will swing back. And I think I'm hoping, with fingers crossed, that this election we'll start to see the beginning of the swing back against the progressive left. I really think so.
Yeah, and I'll say something. I don't know who's going to be listening to this. So I am now taking off my National Motorists Association hat. This is Jay Beeber's opinion, not the National Motorists Association opinion. But I think that if people want to save the Democratic Party, they have to vote Republican this time. They have to send a message that the party has gone too far and that they need to course correct. And
Indeed.
The only way to do that is not to elect people and not to reward them with your vote. If, I know there are a lot of people that hate Donald Trump or hate Republicans or whatever it is. I mean, I'm talking to people in California. California is going to go for Harris. I mean, we know this, right? So when I lived in California, I had the liberty to vote whoever I wanted to because I knew my vote wasn't going to matter. But I mean, and here's the thing: I'm not a big Trump fan. I have never voted for Donald Trump, right? So I'm just saying that the Democratic Party that I grew up with, my parents, like the Kennedy Democratic Party, has gone so far off the rails that if you care about that party and you want it to not go completely down the toilet, don't vote for them and force them to course correct, because that's the only way they'll course correct. And that's just my feeling. Again, personal opinion, not National Motors Association opinion.
And that's fine, because
conversations. So.
I share your opinions, quite frankly, because I think honestly, I mean, I say this without any jest. I think the Democratic Party have gone insane. I mean, I mean, when I first came to the United States, you probably could have put me in their camp, but I cannot see myself being associated with these people. They are going insane. I'm not joking about this. I can't even recognize. Okay, I came to the United States in 1977. And I cannot recognize the Democratic Party that I saw in 1977 when compared to the Democratic Party I'm seeing today. I cannot recognize that party. They are going insane.
You don't recognize the party that's for banning free speech and supporting terrorists? Are you kidding me? like, are you talking about that party that you don't recognize?
Yeah, the one that tells kids, don't tell your parents what we talked about at school today.
Don't tell your parents that they're transitioning either. All them sort of things, man.
But here's the thing, and you said that they've gone crazy, but I think our society has gone crazy just a little bit right now, and I'm actually talking about this. Just to my friends and all, I say this all over and over again. I think we're living right now in a time of collective mental illness. I really do. I think there's just something wrong, something deeply wrong with our psyche. And maybe there's some rational people out there still, but it's like all of this like virtue signaling and narcissism that's going on, and people that just feel like everything should revolve around them and they have to tell everybody what to do because they know better. And I do know that some of this has to do with people coming out of college and a lot of this nonsense being drummed into their heads about how America is racist and capitalism is bad, even though everything in our society that is good in our society is based on the free market. But this nonsense has been drummed into their heads, and you would think that as they grow up and they get into the real world, that they would learn that this stuff is nonsense. But unfortunately, now they're working for the people who this stuff was drummed into their heads as well. So it's insane. But really, I think the pandemic broke the country. It was already broken a little bit before that, but then it really got broken. And I think we need to, people need to take a step back and be like, okay, let's just all let's go back to our basis and not go to crazy town all the time. It's just
fair enough.
we really need to do that.
Yes.
Well, one thing I want to do is jump in with the host prerogative and direct traffic back to talking about traffic.
Let's do that. I'll tell you about anything you want.
Actually, get to a few of these topics.
Why are you interrupting? Why are you interrupting this interesting conversation with Jay, man? Come on.
Oh no, it's a great conversation. I just don't want to lose all the chance to talk about all these related topics for him. But
if we're talking about liberty, it's always related, Jason. So keep going.
Well, actually, this one is related to some of the stuff Jay was talking about earlier, and it has to do with an Illinois license plate camera issue here. That I guess that they're saying that people's rights are being violated by all of these license plate cameras that they have going on there. And there's a lawsuit going on right now. This is an article from June from Reason Magazine. And we actually have a news story as well, just a little bit of video so people can know what we're talking about. So James, can you run KOL1 so that we can just see a real quick snippet on what the issue is here? It's an invisible hand still awake.
Technology meant to help police crack down on crime is now raising concerns about privacy. Over the last 3 years, CPD has installed $420,000 worth of license plate reading cameras. Those cameras capture millions of plates each year, alerting police of any wanted matches. And although Chicago does delete that plate data after 1 year, privacy advocates say that CPD shares that info with other departments with differing policies, leaving drivers vulnerable to hackers.
And to me, one of the most interesting things about that is the fact that it's not just even the one agency that's collecting the data, but that data may be going all over the place of what your your privacy data. So, so Jay, is this one of those issues that you guys are really diving into around the country?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's somewhat new for us, but we are very, very concerned about it, and our members are very, very concerned about it. And there are a lot of privacy issues. I mean, I was talking to some folks from an organization called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They deal with all of this tech stuff and privacy issues, and they basically say that with a license plate reader and one other piece of information, you can pretty much know everything about somebody, and that's scary. Right? Like I know that theoretically you have no have no expectation of privacy in public, but we really don't expect the government to be collecting all of this information and learning everything about us because they're seeing where our license plate shows up over time and what we're doing. You can pretty much figure out almost anything about people, and I don't think that's the kind of society that people want to live in. I'll go back to that thing that I said before. Like if you think this is a good idea, I'm sure North Korea and China would be a great and happy place for you.
Yes.
But this is America, and we really like the dangers of this are huge. And yes, it makes sense if you want to have some technology to help you, find a car that's been stolen. But it's gone way beyond this. And of course, again, it's a government mission creep. And so rather than just take a good idea and kind of put a box around that and keep that safe, it's got to go crazy town. And this is what we're seeing with these things. And here's another thing that people don't realize. It's not just license plate readers. There are Bluetooth readers out there. So if your phone is connected to a car and it's on and your Bluetooth is on and you pass by the same place every day, people will know who you are and that your car is passing by this area every day. And it's, you as an average person can just go out and buy one of these Bluetooth readers. And so the government is doing that as well. And you put all this information and you get these data brokers and they put all their information together. It's very easy for them to have a complete picture of who you are, what you believe in, where you go. And if they don't like that, then, you get to the point where you start getting social credits and they're coming down on you and you can't get a job or you can't go places that you want to go. So it's scary. And we got to stop it early on, because once the genie gets out of the bag, or the bottle, I guess is the right term. It's going to be hard to put that back in again. So we really want to be on top of this early on.
And see,
Well,
but
Jay-
this is the problem, though. This is the problem because we already have the government really already tracking us in various ways. Here we have already an extension of the surveillance state. Now, you said that is we do not have expectation of privacy when you're in public, which is absolutely true. We cannot have that expectation. But I think we could expect that the government will not be tracking our movements when you're out there, which is exactly what they're doing. So this surveillance state that we see developing here you already used the word, is a very dangerous thing we're looking at here because our rights are being constantly being violated, all in the name of giving us some sense of security. And I think one of our founders talk about giving up our liberties in the name of security and all that kind of stuff. But the point is though, the surveillance state is growing, and this is a serious problem in our society today.
Yeah, and people have to wake up about it. And we are lucky that we have the Supreme Court that we have right now, because as these things come to them, folks like Neil Gorsuch, who we spoke about earlier, he's not going to be a big fan of this stuff. And that's why we have to be really careful, because I think the divide between the sort of the liberal wing of the justices and the more conservative wing is really how much faith they have in government. And I think the conservatives are a lot more skeptical about government and government power, and the liberal folks are probably more in tune with the idea that, well, the government can do good things and we should give them some power so they can do these wonderful things, which they're nice things, but that doesn't mean we should give the government power to do that, because as we see, the government just keeps taking more and more and more power, and you need to curtail that. So it's the only way to have a free society.
Indeed.
Jay, there was another concern I had on this as well, but a lot of times, a lot of this, technology that winds up on cars to collect information on us, it may be kind of put there because the government has certain demands on the manufacturers when they're building things. Maybe they want to collect emissions data, or maybe some kind of safety data or something else. But a lot of times this stuff seems to morph into something where now the car companies are collecting information on you as well.
Exactly.
And maybe they're also giving that information out to other private vendors. Is that also a concern of your organization as well?
Yes, we just started working on this. In fact, we're talking to folks in Congress right now. I was in D.C. About 2 months ago, when we were meeting with folks on both sides of the aisle, by the way, about the fact that this is of concern. What's happening? We should back up for a second. So what's happening is that your car, especially the newer cars, anything that's connected to the internet, it like with OnStar or any of these other things that you can have in your car, is that it's collecting all sorts of data. So it collects not only like if you break down, but if how hard you accelerate, how hard you brake, what time of day you travel, where you're traveling, what kind of roads you're on. All of this kind of stuff is being collected. And what the auto manufacturers have been doing is they've been collecting this data because they claim that it's their data. It's not. It's your data, but they claim that it's theirs. And so they then sell it to a third-party broker, who is then selling it to whoever wants it. And a lot of times that's your insurance company, who then uses that to jack up your rates. So we've been contacted by our members and by other folks to say, like, they had a real shock because their insurance rates went up. They didn't have any accidents. They didn't have any reason why their rates should have gone up. But when they drilled down into this, they found out their insurance company finally told them, like, oh yeah, well, we collected this data, and there was things in there that make you a higher risk. So we're going to jack up your rates. And there are ways to theoretically opt out of these things, but it's a lot of hurdles. I got a Subaru recently, and I called the company and they kind of walked me through their website and whatnot, but I have to follow up on that now and see what they actually removed and what they're not collecting, what they're still collecting. This is a really hard thing to do because they're the experts on this, and the average person is not. So we're gonna be helpful to folks with regards to how to prevent some of this from happening, because again, it's one of those dangerous steps where every piece of information about you is being collected, and again, you marry that with a license plate reader, and forget it. They know everything about you.
Exactly. And the other thing too that people don't realize is that even though a lot of this data may be collected by a private organization, maybe a car manufacturer or somebody like that, this data could be easily, once collected, it could be easily subpoenaed. Easily. They could always come up with an excuse as to why they need the information. And of course, the court's probably going to allow it. Too often they allow it. So the information could end up in the hands of the government through a subpoena. It's very easy for it to be done.
Yeah, maybe to see if you're breaking your COVID rule or something.
Yeah,
Driving on when you're not supposed to.
We can talk about that as well, but look, almost every newer vehicle, and when I say newer, within the last decade to 2 decades, has a black box in it that is collecting data on you. And if you're in an accident or something, theoretically they could subpoena that and find out how fast were you driving when that happened, or what was going on. So this is actually already out there and it's already happening. And look, we have to be very careful that they can't get this information just because they want it, that there has to be a legitimate reason for doing so. And that reason should be very, very clear and should serve a much greater public purpose than, hey, we want to, or it's convenient for us.
Sure, absolutely, yes.
Well, now I think is a good time to segue into another topic I wanted to touch on, and that was congestion pricing. There was something on the news recently about, in fact, it was in New York, Kathy Hochul, and James, maybe you could bring up the visual on this. So she had tried to push a congestion pricing for all the drivers coming into New York, and they would have to pay. And of course, there are some reasons, and we'll talk about those, of why maybe congestion pricing might make some sense, but anyways, Kathy Hochul was trying to push that in there, and it was very unpopular. And anyways, we actually have some video of her talking about it, and maybe we could play the clip. James, is KOL2.
We are going to be the very first state in the nation, the very first city in America to have a congestion pricing plan. We are setting the standard right here in real time for how we can achieve cleaner air, safer streets, and better transit. This day was coming for a long time, but it was a thoughtful, methodical process. Let's talk about the fact that we can generate revenue, we can win. So after careful consideration, I have come to the difficult decision that implementing the planned congestion pricing system risks too many unintended consequences for New Yorkers at this time. For that reason, I have directed the MTA to indefinitely pause the program.
So they were going to win. They were going to collect a lot of revenue, and now it's fallen to the wayside.
I think the revenue part of that was the main part of it, actually.
Yes.
So, but I love the way you put that together. 1 year later.
Exactly.
Very good.
Well, it's funny though, because there were, you talk about the revenue thing, and there were some big issues that New York is having, and it was like they were trying to generate revenue to pay for a lot of the government's other failings on transportation. And Jane, maybe you could bring up the visual, but apparently New York's MTA, I guess they run their subway system there, or they attempt to run their subway system there. Part of the problem is that these subways are extremely unsafe. They've even had to bring in the National Guard at times recently. They've been losing money hand over fist because they refuse to try to enforce people paying at the turnstiles. So I mean, people, I guess it's notorious that people just jump over the turnstiles.
Oh, yes.
They go through all kinds of things. And so they're saying that this particular article from Bloomberg was saying back in 2023 that they'd lost $690 million on fares. So, yeah. I mean, part of the reason that they were trying to do this congestion was to, help make up for this. And of course, we talk about safety, people being pushed on the tracks. It seems to be a regular story there by people who they refuse to arrest. But it is funny though, because there are some good reasons for congestion pricing. And so maybe I could bring in a visual on that too, James. This is KOL3. This is, Los Angeles's traffic.
Congestion is a very non-linear phenomenon. It's really the last few vehicles entering a road that cause a lot of the delay. The road system in big, really congested places like Los Angeles or New York is often in a state of what transportation scholars call hypercongestion, which is that the road is so full that everyone is actually moving much slower, and because they're moving so much slower, fewer drivers can use the road.
Traffic is complicated, but let's break this down. Roads are meant to carry a certain number of cars, but as soon as these roads are overloaded, traffic slows dramatically. Therefore, to keep traffic flowing, we need to keep the number of cars on the road just below the overall capacity of the roadway.
So anyways, there are some, I guess, economic, rationales for if you have a scarce good and it's being overconsumed because it doesn't have a proper price on it, then maybe there's a reason to inject a price signal. Jay, what's your thought on all this? Because you must have seen this playing out all over the country. What are your thoughts on the whole congestion pricing?
Yeah, so here's the thing about congestion pricing, which is that I think it's a big fallacy. Which is that, yeah, in theory, if you price lanes or you price the roadway to some extent at certain times of the day, you might be able to get some people to shift their time, or I don't think you're going to get very many people to shift their mode of transportation, but you might be able to get people to choose to go at a different time if the cost is less at a different time. But also the signal, the market signal of, hey, the road is really congestion, don't drive on there now, is also a pretty good market signal. So you don't really need pricing to do it, because if you don't, but here's the thing, and I say this often, which is that traffic seeks its own level, right? So it's just like water. So if you reduce the number of cars, okay, then all of a sudden the speeds go back up again. So you're going to get more people traveling at that time. So the problem with congestion, especially in a place like California and LA, is that they're actually taking away car lanes. They're not adding car lanes. So they, and the argument sometimes is, well, how many car lanes can we possibly add before, like, the only thing, and we have saw this during the pandemic, the only thing that actually will adjust congestion is not having to take the trip in the first place. And so the more that people get things delivered, or they can work from home, and I was on a panel about this a couple of years ago, and they were talking about the future of transportation in LA, and I said, this is way before the pandemic, and I say, maybe there's 5 to 10% of people are working from home. Like if you bump that up to 20 or 30%, now you really actually have a reduction in the number of people that are on the road every day, because most of the traffic has to do with commuting for the most part. And so there are ways to encourage things that don't hurt people by charging them. New York's congestion pricing plan was 100% about generating revenue for a system that was failing, that will continue to fail, because nobody wants to ride the subways because it's dangerous. And if you're a woman, it's really dangerous, right? So who wants to do that? Plus, a lot of people fled during the pandemic, and a lot of those people have not come back to the offices. So there's less people riding the system and all of this kind of thing. So there's a lot of reason why that system is failing. And yet it's still the most robust one in the country, believe it or not. So you're not going to get people to switch modes, and especially there just isn't an option. Look, when I lived in LA and I had to go down to downtown LA, I lived in the Valley, and I had to go down to City Hall. If it was convenient for me, sometimes I would take the Red Line. I'd park at Universal Studios, and I get on the train, and I would go down. I get back on the train and come back, pick up my car, and for those kinds of trips, transit makes sense. But no amount of congestion pricing, if I had to go 3 other places and not just go back and forth, is going to make a difference to me. And so what you're doing is you're hurting commerce, you're hurting the average person, you're hurting the person that doesn't have the luxury to work at home. You're hurting the person that doesn't have the luxury to shift their time, because they're working 2 jobs and not just 1 job. And so I think it's the poorest folks in our society that got hurt the most by these policies.
But then Jay, how do you? Okay, I mean, what you just laid out sounds great on paper, I have to say, with all due respect. But how do you incentivize people to, without charging people a price or some cost, when the roads are expected to be congested, where to me is some kind of price signal. I don't know if the price signal is perfect, but there's some kind of price signal that here the road is congested. They're gonna, if you want to keep on going into Lower Manhattan or wherever the hell you want to go at a peak hour, this is what it's gonna cost you. Without that, how could you incentivize people not to want to travel at the peak hours other than using some sort of price signal?
I would say this, and look, I lived in New Jersey, so I'm very familiar with Manhattan and traveling into Manhattan. People don't go into Manhattan to just drive around in Manhattan. like they go there for a purpose. And all of this has to do with whether it's an economic purpose, like someone's going in because they have a job or they have something that they have to take their car in. But because of the way the transit works in Manhattan and in the tri-state area there, if you could take public transit in and it was relatively safe, most people would do that because it's infinitely more convenient. Forget the pricing. Just because you can't get around, there's no place to park, it's much harder. But once you get into like the evening and it starts getting dangerous, most people are going to want to drive in. And so most of the people, a large number of people that commute into New York are doing so by public transit, and the people who are not are doing so because they kind of have to. And so, yeah, pricing does make sense, but also time is money. So if you're spending a lot more time sitting in traffic, then that's going to be a cost as well. So there is a pricing signal already built into congestion. But I'll give an example. I was in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago, and I was doing an interview with Channel 2 there, and I had to go across the George Washington Bridge, and I had to meet them at 5 o'clock because that's when they were available. So I had to drive across the bridge, and I had to drive back across when it was congested, and I had to pay a lot of money for that toll. But I did that because I had to. There was really no convenient way. It would have taken me hours and hours and hours to get there through some kind of transit or something like that. I was in the middle of my day. I drove over, I did the interview, an hour later I drove back. That's what people have to do. And that's sort of the freedom of the personal automobile to do that. And so you have to make sure that whatever these plans are, they don't turn into something else entirely. And I think that's whether we're talking about a per mile charge for every mile that you drive to, kind of bolster the gas tax and things like that, or whether it's congestion pricing. Again, managed lanes is a different animal. The congestion pricing for New York was like, hey, this is a place where we think a lot of people want to go and have to go. So let's just charge the money to do it so we get more revenue. That's really what that congestion pricing plan was about. There may be some that make sense. Look, I talked to somebody recently who London has congestion pricing. Okay. I mean, there's a congestion pricing tax or whatever it is. And it's still congested. it hasn't eliminated the congestion. It just costs people more, but they have to pay it. So they figure out a way to pay it, or like in New York, which was happening, is they find a way around it, like they hide their license plate or something like that. So there's problems with those plans, and you have to be really careful about when you implement them, how you implement them.
That's the big tragedy, is once you turn something into a revenue stream, it's hard to know if it's going to go anywhere near what it was, what the original purpose of the whole thing was supposed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, we're getting near the end of, we've just gone to an hour, so I think it's about time to get close to wrapping up. But I tell you what, well, unless you want to do the roadkill, we did have a roadkill segment, so we could do that if you really want to.
I don't. You're not. There was a bill this year in California. I think it was in California, having to do with allowing people to collect roadkill. I know nothing about it, so I'm not going to be good information on that. So.
Well, I tell you what, if we have you back another time, you can come and talk about roadkill.
I'll study up.
Yeah, but what we like to do near the end of the show is end it off with our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, and so that's finding something that somebody in the press or somebody in politics has said something kind of just absolutely ridiculous or something we can all laugh at, and so that brings us to our our Secretary of Transportation. So now that would be a good time to bring that up. Exactly. But so not too long ago, he was, I guess he was assigned, I guess he had all this money that he was given to try and get charging stations out there for EVs. And so we actually have a video of him. I guess they've got $7.5 billion, and they've managed to get almost none of these chargers out there.
There were seven.
7 or 8, 7 or 8, yeah, something like that. Yes.
Well, let's go to the video because it did. The best thing is to hear it from the horse's mouth, and we have Horse Pete. So, James, can you play KNP1?
And let me ask you about a portion of this that I think does fall under your portfolio, and that's the charging stations you mentioned. The Federal Highway Administration says only 7 or 8 charging stations have been produced with a $7.5 billion investment that taxpayers made back in 2021. Why isn't that happening more quickly?
So the president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers up by the end of this decade. Now, in order to do a charger, it's more than just plunking a small device into the ground. There's utility work, and this is also really a new category of federal investment. But we've been working with each of the 50 states. Every one of them is getting formula dollars to do this work, engaging them in the first handful. Again, by 2030, 500,000.
So in all fairness to Pete, that video was from May, so they may be at 9 or 10 by now.
We would hope. We can hope. We can always hope.
Right.
But James, can you bring up the visual here? No, sorry, we're just going to bring up another visual real quick to show Mayor Pete. And anyways, this is weighing on Mayor Pete. And anyway, the little cabinet secretary who couldn't.
Poor Secretary Pete. He looks very sad and lonely in this picture. I feel bad for him.
He's just waiting for those chargers.
He's waiting for the chargers.
Yeah.
He's like, where's my tractor trailer full of chargers?
Yes.
But wait, there's an electric one. They can't get here.
Yeah.
There's no chargers out there to charge the truck that's bringing the chargers. This is what the government always does, right? It's like, again, when it's a massive failure. I go back to this. It's a massive failure. We're just not doing enough of it. We spent $7 million. We got 7, and the reason we don't have millions of these is because we haven't spent enough money. Because $7 million, $1 million per charger. And the other thing is they're always moving the ball, right? Like they're always.
Well, this was billions. I mean, this was 7.5 billion.
$7.5 billion. Yes.
Right. So it's $1 billion a charger. Man, you know what? They pay me $1 billion. I'll give them 2 chargers.
Of course. Well, I'll give them 10. Come on, man. I could do better than you.
This is the market at work right here, Pete.
I'll give you an analogy to this, which is something called, we don't have time to get into this whole thing next time, but there's this thing called Vision Zero, right? And this idea is, this is this crazy idea that no one will ever die in a traffic accident ever again. This is Vision Zero, right? And to try to push this, it's like all this crazy stuff to try to curtail your driving, because we have to get down to 0. Right. And so originally, and this is true in LA, but it's true in a lot of other cities. The plan was by like 2019, we were going to get to 0. Okay. And then it went up instead of going down. Right. So now then it went to 2025, and now not getting it anywhere near 2025. So now it's 2040. Right. Like they keep pushing it out further and further and further. So 2 things. First of all, they'll never be able to disprove it because the goalpost keeps moving. And then the other thing, by the time we get there and we find out that this was a complete massive failure, those people are out of office and they've got some other government job somewhere. So, yes. But this is what it is. Pete fails upwards, and so does our vice president. And this is unfortunately what we got running the federal government right now. So.
And notice they always point to the glory of the future, right? Because we only have $7.5 billion so invested. We only have 7 or 8 already installed, and now he's pointing to the glory of our future. We're going to have half a million by 2030 or whatever it is. They always point to that glory. We always have to do just a little bit more, and we'll get it all done. Look at your record, fool. Look at your record. Do you think anybody's going to believe you could only get in the last 3 years or whatever it is, you could only do 7 or 8, but somehow or the other, by 2030, you're going to have half a million up. Come on.
I like Leon, but he sounds a little angry. I don't know what's going on there.
You'd think he bought an electric car and was waiting for
yeah,
a charger.
You'd think, Leon, you would think this was for money that they were spending. But this is the government. It's always, if you give us enough time, money, and power, we'll create that utopia for you.
Of course.
That's always what they're about. Whether it's we'll eliminate all traffic deaths, we'll have all electric vehicles by such and such a date. Oh no, not this date, the next date. Oh no, wait, not the next date. So it's and of course, people that are buying electric vehicles are now going back to internal combustion engines. So, this is just fantasy. And if they feel like if they take enough of your money, they can do something with it that somehow their ideology tells them that they are supposed to do, because it's all about virtue signaling. So
they'll always fulfill the utopia that they're trying to create sometime in the glorious future.
Right.
Always.
Right. In the meantime, we have to live in the dystopia that they've created.
Yes.
On the way there.
Yes.
Well, I tell you, if this is how they're doing with charging stations, I'm not going to be the first on those electric planes when they start coming.
That's true.
But I think we've about reached the end of the show. So Jay, did you have any last things you wanted to share with the audience? I'll bring back up your webpage again. James, maybe you can bring up the National Motorists Association webpage.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you've made it this far, thanks. Thanks for listening. And join. See, this is up there. Become a member. It's the cost of membership is a tank of gas. No, wait a minute. We're talking to people in California. Half a tank of gas is the cost, $42 a year, and you get all these wonderful benefits, and help us fight the fight. We'll help you fight the fight. The only way we can, we're talking about a lot of stuff. Some of it is incredibly crazy. Some of it is crazy to come. But join us, become a member. There's the only way we can fight this is if we have an army of folks like you folks out there to help us, and for us to help you work together, and we can stop some of these crazy policies. That's the only way to do it.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thanks so much, Jay, for joining us today. And if you're watching before the next show, think about what you can do in your community, because you've seen people here who are fighting for us on the roads for our liberty. You've seen people fighting for us in the schools. I tell you that they're coming for our liberty everywhere. So you think about what you can do in your community to further our liberty, because we need everybody in the fight. So until the next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.